What happens when the weakest wolf in the pack turns out to be the most powerful being alive? For Alara Moonwhisper, life meant survival. As the only Omega in the Silverpine pack, she existed in the margins, cooking, cleaning, enduring the sneers and the casual cruelty that came with being powerless. Her wolf was silent. Her scent, though sweet with lavender and morning dew, carried no dominance, no threat. She was invisible to most, a shadow beneath the hierarchy's boot. But when Alpha Garrett Blackthorn rejected her as his fated mate in front of the entire pack during the Harvest Moon ceremony, everything changed. And what happens next, no one was prepared for. Not the pack, not the Alpha King who would find her bleeding in the snow, and certainly not the ancient prophecy that had been waiting 2,000 years for her blood to spill. The Harvest Moon hung fat and golden over Silverpine territory, casting long shadows across the ceremonial grounds. Alara stood at the back of the gathering, as always, her threadbare dress doing little against the autumn chill. Around her, wolves in their finest clothes laughed and drank, celebrating another year of prosperity. She shouldn't have come, but when the pack gathered, attendance was mandatory, even for Omegas. "The Moon Goddess has blessed us again." Alpha Garrett's voice boomed across the clearing, and the crowd roared its approval. He stood on the raised platform, every inch the powerful leader, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair tied back to reveal the sharp angles of his face. His scent of forest and embers and ozone rolled over the gathering like a storm front. Alara's wolf stirred, just barely, a flutter like wings against a cage. She pressed a hand to her chest, confused. Her wolf never moved, never spoke. In 23 years, she'd heard only silence from that part of herself. "Tonight," Garrett continued, his amber eyes scanning the crowd, "we celebrate not just our harvest, but the future of our pack." He paused, and his gaze found her. Time stopped. The bond snapped into place with the force of a lightning strike. Alara gasped, stumbling backward as invisible threads wrapped around her heart, her soul, binding her to the Alpha in a connection so profound it brought tears to her eyes. The scent of forest and embers flooded her senses, mixed with something else, something that was uniquely theirs. Fated mates. The crowd had gone silent, every head turned toward her. Alara felt their stares like physical weight, pressing down on her shoulders. "No," Garrett said quietly, then louder. "No." The single word cracked like a whip. He descended from the platform, each step deliberate, his face twisted with something between disgust and fury. The crowd parted before him like water. When he stood before her, Alara could barely breathe past the bond that thrummed between them, urging her to touch him, to complete the connection. "The Moon Goddess made a mistake," Garrett announced, his voice carrying across the deathly silent gathering. "She would not bind me to an Omega, to a wolf without power, without strength, without worth." "Please," Alara whispered. The bond was agony now, pulling her toward him while his rejection pushed her away. "I don't understand. You are not my mate." He reached up, pulling a ceremonial knife from his belt. The silver blade gleamed in the moonlight. "I, Alpha Garrett Blackthorn of the Silverpine Pack, formally reject you, Alara Moonwhisper, as my fated mate. May the Moon Goddess witness and sever what should never have been." He drew the blade across his palm. Blood welled, black in the moonlight. The bond between them turned to jagged glass. Alara screamed. The pain was beyond anything she'd imagined, not just emotional, but physical, a tearing sensation that started in her chest and radiated outward until every nerve was on fire. She collapsed to her knees, gasping, as the threads that had connected them for those brief, beautiful moments shredded apart. Around her, wolves whispered. Some laughed. "Pathetic," someone muttered. "An Omega? The Alpha's mate? The Moon Goddess truly tests us." Through her tears, Alara looked up at Garrett. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes, regret perhaps, or pain. But then Beta Marcus stepped forward, whispering something in the Alpha's ear, and Garrett's face hardened. "Remove her," he commanded. Guards seized Alara's arms, hauling her to her feet. She could barely stand, the severed bond leaving her hollow and broken. "Wait," she managed. "My parents—" "Your parents have already been informed," Garrett said coldly. He turned his back on her, addressing the crowd instead. Let this be a lesson. Strength mates with strength, power with power. The weak have no place in leadership. The guards dragged her through the crowd, faces blurred past, some pitying, most indifferent, a few openly gleeful. At the edge of the gathering, Alara saw her mother and father standing together, their expressions carefully blank. "Mother," she pleaded, "please." Her mother looked away. Her father shook his head slowly. "You brought this shame on yourself, girl. We cannot help you." "But I've done nothing wrong. The bond, it was real, I felt it." "Enough," her father said sharply. "We have other children to think of. Your presence here endangers us all. Go, and don't come back." The finality in his voice broke something in Alara that even the bond severing hadn't touched. These were her parents, the people who should have loved her unconditionally, and they were casting her out as easily as throwing away spoiled meat. The guards dragged her to the territory's northern border, where the forest grew thick and dark, and the wind already carried the bite of early winter. They threw her across the boundary line like garbage. "Alpha's orders," one of them said, not unkindly. "You're banished. If you set foot in Silverpine territory again, you'll be killed on sight." They left her there, in the dark, with nothing but the thin dress on her back. Alara lay in the frost-covered leaves for a long time, too broken to move. Above her, the harvest moon watched silently, its golden face offering no comfort. Eventually, cold forced her to her feet. She stumbled into the forest, her bare feet numb, her whole body shaking. She had no destination, no plan, just a vague instinct to keep moving, to put distance between herself and the pack that had thrown her away. The temperature dropped as night deepened. Alara's breath came in white puffs, her lips turning blue. Her thin dress offered no protection against the wind that howled through the trees like a living thing. She walked for hours, maybe longer. Time became meaningless, just an endless cycle of cold and pain and putting one foot in front of the other. Then she heard it, a sound that stopped her in her tracks, a whimper, high-pitched and desperate. Alara turned toward the sound, her frozen brain struggling to process. There, in a small ravine half hidden by underbrush, a wolf cub. It couldn't have been more than 3 months old, its fur silver-white and matted with something dark. Blood. The cub whimpered again, trying to drag itself forward. One of its back legs was caught in a cruel steel trap, the kind rogue hunters sometimes left in neutral territory. Every rational part of Alara screamed at her to keep walking. She was dying herself. She had nothing left to give. But the cub's eyes met hers, pale blue, filled with pain and terror, and her feet moved before her mind could stop them. She half fell down the embankment, landing hard beside the trapped animal. The cub snarled weakly, trying to defend itself despite its obvious agony. "Shh," Alara whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm going to help you." The trap was old iron, its teeth sunk deep into the cub's leg. Alara's hands were numb, her fingers, barely able to grip the metal. The first time she tried to pry it open, nothing happened. The second time, her frozen skin tore against the rough metal, blood welling hot against her palms. She didn't stop. Using every ounce of strength she had left, Alara forced the jaws of the trap apart. The cub yelped as its leg came free, and Alara nearly sobbed with relief. She pulled the small creature into her arms, cradling it against her chest. "You're safe now," she murmured, even as darkness crept into the edges of her vision. "You're safe." The cub's warmth was fading. Or maybe it was hers. Alara couldn't tell anymore. She stumbled forward, looking for shelter, but her legs wouldn't hold her. She collapsed into the snow that had begun to fall, the cub still clutched in her arms. "This is it," she thought distantly. "This is how I die." At least the cub would be warm for a little longer. At least she'd done one good thing before the end. The snow fell harder, covering them both in white. Alara's eyes drifted closed. The cold stopped hurting. Everything stopped hurting. The last thing she heard was a howl, deep and powerful and achingly beautiful, echoing through the forest like the voice of the moon itself. Then darkness claimed her. Warmth. That was the first thing Alara registered when consciousness returned. Not the burning warmth of fever, but something steady and alive surrounding her completely. She forced her eyes open and found herself surrounded by wolves. Her heart stuttered. She tried to sit up, but her body wouldn't obey. The wolves pressed closer, and she realized with dawning shock that they were the source of warmth, massive bodies arranged around her in a protective circle, their combined heat keeping the freezing night at bay. These weren't ordinary wolves. Even in her weakened state, Alara could see that. They were huge, each one easily twice the size of a normal alpha wolf, with fur that seemed to shimmer in the pre-dawn light. 1, 2, 3. She counted them with growing disbelief. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 massive wolves, all watching her with intelligent eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness. The cub. Where was the cub? A whimper answered her unspoken question. The silver-white cub was curled against her side, its injured leg carefully positioned to avoid pressure. Someone had wrapped the wound with strips of what looked like cloth torn from a shirt. "You're awake." The voice was deep, resonant, and entirely human. Alara's head snapped toward the sound. A man stood at the entrance to what she now realized was an abandoned barn, ancient wood barely holding together against the elements, but providing crucial shelter from the wind. He was tall. That was her first thought, impossibly tall, with shoulders that seemed to block out the doorway. He wore simple clothes, dark pants, a shirt that strained across his chest, but carried himself with an authority that made Alpha, Garrett, look like a pretender playing at power. His hair was dark, shot through with silver at the temples, and a scar ran from his left eyebrow down to his jaw. But it was his eyes that held her frozen, pale silver, ancient and knowing, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. The scent of aged oak and winter snow and pine wrapped around her, mixed with something wild and untamed. Storm. He smelled like an approaching storm, electric and dangerous and inevitable. "The cub," Alara managed, her voice barely a whisper. He'll live, thanks to you." The man moved closer, his steps silent despite his size. The wolves shifted to make room for him, their tails wagging slightly. "You saved the son of my second-in-command at the cost of your own life. That kind of courage is rare." He knelt beside her, and Alara realized he was examining her hands, torn and bloody from the trap, frostbitten and swollen. "Who are you?" she asked. A slight smile touched his lips. "My name is Kale Stormborn, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, commander of the Unchained." He gestured to the massive wolves around them. "And we've been waiting for you, Alara Moonwhisper." The world tilted. "You know my name. How do you—" "The prophecy spoke of you," Kyle said simply. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movements, and gently took one of her injured hands in his. His touch was warm, careful. It said that when the moon turned golden and the blood of the Forsaken spilled on neutral ground, the matriarch would rise. Powerless, they would call her, broken and cast out, but in her moment of selfless sacrifice, the ancient binding would shatter. A wave of power washed over Alara, emanating from Kale's touch. Her hands tingled, the pain receding as she watched in amazement, the torn skin knitted together, the frostbite fading, until only smooth, unblemished skin remained. "You're a healer," she breathed. "All alphas have some healing ability, but mine is stronger than most." He released her hand, sitting back on his heels. "Can you stand?" Alara tried. Her legs shook, but with Kale's steady hand on her elbow, she managed to get to her feet. The wolves, the Unchained, watched her with what looked like reverence. "I don't understand any of this," Alara said. Her voice was stronger now, her body responding to the healing. "A prophecy? The matriarch? I'm just an Omega. I don't even have a wolf voice." "You do," Kyle said quietly. "You've always had one. But it was bound when you were an infant, locked away behind walls of magic so powerful that even the moon goddess couldn't break through." The barn seemed to spin. "That's impossible. Why would anyone?" "Fear," a new voice said. One of the massive wolves shifted, bones flowing and reforming until a man stood in its place. He was younger than Kale, with bronze skin and kind eyes, though a wicked scar bisected his throat. "Your parents feared what you were, what you could become." "This is Marcus," Kale said, "my second, the cub's father." Marcus inclined his head toward Alara. "You saved my son, little Omega. For that alone you have my eternal loyalty. But you are so much more than you know." I don't understand, Alara repeated, but even as she said it, something stirred inside her. Deep in her chest, where the severed mate bond had left a gaping wound, she felt movement. Her wolf. No longer silent, no longer caged. "Hello, sister," a voice said in her mind, powerful, ancient, and undeniably hers. "At last we are one." Alara gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. The voice, her wolf, thrummed with barely contained power. How? Why now? The rejection, her wolf replied. The pain, the severing of the bond. It broke the binding our parents placed on us. We are finally free. Tears streamed down Alara's face. "I can hear her," she whispered. "My wolf, I can hear her." Kyle's expression softened. "The binding was keyed to your acceptance of your station, your belief in your own powerlessness. The moment Garrett rejected you, the moment your parents turned their backs, that acceptance shattered. You stopped believing the lie." "But the prophecy," Alara said, looking around at the assembled wolves. "The matriarch. What does that even mean?" The wolves exchanged glances. Then, as one, they lowered their heads in a gesture of respect so profound it took Alara's breath away. "It means," Kale said softly, "that you are not an Omega, Alara Moonwhisper. You never were. You are the matriarch reborn, the first wolf, the ancestor from whom all werewolves descend, and you are about to change everything." The barn fell silent, except for the whistle of wind through the cracks. Alara stared at Kyle, then at the bowed heads of the Unchained, then back at Kyle. "That's insane," she managed. "Is it?" Kyle gestured to her hands, perfectly healed, glowing faintly with a light that hadn't been there before. "You survived rejection, a severed bond, exposure, and blood loss that would have killed any wolf. You used your last strength to save a stranger's child, and now your wolf speaks to you for the first time in your life, just as the prophecy said she would." "Transform," her wolf urged. "Let me show you what we truly are." "I've never shifted before," Alara said aloud. "I don't know how." "Let go," Kyle said simply. "Stop fighting. Stop believing you're small, and let your wolf rise." Alara closed her eyes. Inside her, the wolf waited, patient, powerful, ready. She took a deep breath and did what Kyle suggested. She let go. The transformation started like a wave of liquid fire, rolling through her body from core to extremities, but there was no pain. This wasn't the violent, bone-snapping shift she'd heard other wolves describe. This was fluid, natural, like water finding its level. Her bones flowed, lengthening and reshaping. Fur emerged, not brown or gray or even black, but pure white, shot through with silver that gleamed like moonlight. Her senses exploded outward. She could smell everything: the ancient wood of the barn, the snow outside, the unique scents of each unchained member. Kyle's storm and oak scent now mixed with something else. Awe, she grew and grew and grew. When the transformation completed, Alara stood on 4 paws in the center of the barn. The Unchained, massive as they were, looked small beside her. She stood nearly as tall as Kale at the shoulder, her body corded with muscle, her fur radiating a soft, ethereal light. She looked down at her paws, each one the size of a dinner plate, tipped with claws that gleamed like polished silver. What am I?" "You are the matriarch," Kyle breathed, and in his voice was a reverence that bordered on worship. "Goddess above, the prophecy didn't do you justice." Alara turned her head, catching sight of herself in a shard of broken mirror leaning against the barn wall. Her eyes were no longer the soft brown they'd been as a human. They were pure silver, glowing with an inner light that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. She opened her mouth and howled. The sound that emerged was nothing like a normal wolf's call. It was primal, powerful, a song that resonated in the chest and the bones and the very air itself. The barn shook. The windows rattled. Outside, the storm that had been threatening all night finally broke, snow falling in thick, heavy sheets. The Unchained threw back their heads and answered her call, their voices joining hers in a harmony that was older than memory. And somewhere, Far to the south in Silverpine territory, Alpha Garrett Blackthorn jerked awake in his bed, his heart racing, his wolf howling in agony at a loss he couldn't name. He made a mistake. He didn't just reject his mate. He rejected his destiny, his purpose, his very soul, and the entire world had just felt the moment his Omega became a queen. Alara shifted back to human form, the transformation as smooth as the first. She stood naked in the barn, but one of the unchained, a female with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, immediately wrapped a cloak around her shoulders. "My name is Vera," the woman said, smiling. "I've been waiting to meet you for a very long time." "How long?" Alara asked, her voice shaking. Everything felt too big, too overwhelming. An hour ago, she'd been dying in the snow. Now she stood in a barn surrounded by mythical wolves, having just transformed into something out of legend. 2,000 years, Kyle said. He'd remained in human form, watching her with those ancient silver eyes. The last matriarch fell in battle against the Shadow King. As she died, she cast a spell, binding her power, her essence, her very being into the bloodline of her daughter. The power would sleep, she decreed, until the need was great and the chosen one appeared. "Chosen by what criteria?" Alara demanded. She was starting to feel less overwhelmed and more angry. All her life, she'd been told she was nothing, worthless. And now these strangers claimed she was some prophesied savior. "By suffering," Marcus said quietly. He'd shifted back to human form, though he remained near his sleeping cub. "By sacrifice, by the willingness to give everything for others, even when the world has given you nothing but pain." The prophecy was clear. When the moon turns gold and the Forsaken bleeds, when power mates with weakness and the bond is torn, when she who has nothing gives her all for those who cannot speak, the matriarch will wake, and the old world will be reborn. "But my parents," Alara said, the anger draining into confusion, "if they bound my power, they must have known. Why would they do that?" "Because they were afraid." A new voice spoke, and another of the Unchained shifted, an older man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. "I'm Elder Finn. I was there the night you were born, child. I saw what you did." "What I did?" "I was a baby." "You were a baby who manifested her wolf form within minutes of birth," Finn said gently. "A baby whose howl shattered every window in your parents' house and brought every wolf in a 5-mile radius to their knees. Your father called me in a panic, said you would bring the wrong attention, that the old packs, the ones who still hunted for the matriarch's line, would kill you if they knew what you were. So they bound me," Alara whispered, "locked away my wolf, made me an Omega." "They saved your life," Finn said, "or so they believed, but in doing so they condemned you to a half-life, neither wolf nor human, never truly belonging anywhere." Alara's legs gave out. She sank to the barn floor, the cloak pooling around her. Kyle moved to sit beside her, close enough for comfort, but not touching. "I know this is a lot," he said quietly. "We've had 2,000 years to prepare for your arrival. You've had less than an hour to process the truth." "Why are you here?" Alara asked. She looked up at him, at this Alpha King who commanded mythical wolves and spoke of prophecies like they were weather reports. "Why were you looking for me?" "Because the world needs you," Kyle said simply. "The packs grow corrupt. The hierarchy breeds cruelty. Omegas are treated as slaves, while alphas abuse their power. Rogues multiply, driven mad by a system that casts them out for the smallest infractions. The moon goddess gave us the mate bond to guide us toward balance, toward love. But wolves like Garrett Blackthorn have twisted it into another tool of oppression." He leaned forward, his silver eyes intense. "The matriarch was never just a queen, Alara. She was justice. She was the voice of those who couldn't speak. She was the one who kept the alphas in check, who reminded us that power is not a right, but a responsibility. Without her, we've lost our way." "And you think I can fix that?" Alara laughed bitterly. "I'm one wolf, one confused, traumatized wolf who just learned she's not actually what she thought she was. What am I supposed to do against centuries of tradition?" "You're going to learn," Vera said firmly. She knelt on Alara's other side. "You're going to train. You're going to grow into your power, and when you're ready, you're going to remind every alpha in this territory exactly what happens when they forget that strength isn't just about size and dominance, it's about character, about choosing to protect rather than oppress. The Unchained will stand with you, Marcus added. We swore an oath 2,000 years ago to serve the matriarch when she returned. That oath binds us still. One by one, the others shifted to human form. 10 warriors in total, each scarred and powerful in their own right. They knelt before Alara, fists pressed to hearts. We are the Unchained, they said in unison, bound by prophecy, forged in battle, and we will follow you into death itself, matriarch, if you will have us. Tears stung. Alara's eyes again. These strangers, these mythical warriors, were offering her what her own family never had: loyalty, acceptance, a place to belong. I don't even know your names, she said, her voice breaking. Then allow us to introduce ourselves properly, Kael said, and for the first time, Alara saw him smile. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges and making him look almost boyish. I am Kael Stormborn, Alpha King of the Northern Territories. These are my Unchained. He gestured to each warrior in turn. Marcus Ashwood, my second and the cub's father. Vera Nightshade, our tracker and scout. Elder Finn Oakhart, our historian and keeper of the old ways. Thorn Blackwater, weapons master. Soren Silverstream, our healer. Kira Flameheart, mistress of strategy. Bran Ironwood, our logistics expert. Lyra Moonstone, our diplomat. And last but never least, Dax Stormbringer, who handles special situations. Dax, a massive man with a shaved head and more scars than anyone should survive, grinned at her. I kill the things that need killing, little matriarch, and I'm very good at my job. Despite everything, Alara found herself smiling back. These people, these wolves, were offering her a chance, a purpose, a family. Okay, she said, taking a deep breath. Okay. I don't understand all of this. I don't know if I can be what you need me to be. But I'll try. Teach me. Kyle's smile widened. He stood, offering her his hand. Then let's begin. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of training and discovery. Kyle and the Unchained had a camp deeper in the neutral territory, a collection of sturdy cabins built around a central clearing, hidden from casual discovery by ancient protective wards. Alara learned to shift at will, the transformation becoming easier each time. She learned to control her strength, which was considerable. In wolf form, she could run faster than any of the Unchained except Kyle, who somehow kept pace with her despite his smaller size. You're holding back, he said one afternoon as they raced through the snow, his storm and oak scent wrapped around her even in the cold wind. Stop thinking like an Omega. You're not fragile. You can't break yourself. Let me, her wolf urged. Let me show you what we can do. Alara stopped fighting her instincts and simply ran. The world became a blur of white and gray and green. Her paws barely touched the ground. The wind screamed past her ears, and when she finally skidded to a halt at the edge of a frozen lake, she found Cal standing there waiting for her, breathing hard but grinning like a madman. Now that, he said, was the matriarch. She also discovered other abilities, gifts that the binding had hidden. When Marcus's cub, whose name was Ash, whimpered with pain from his healing leg, Alara could ease his discomfort with a touch, her power flowing into him like warm honey. When tensions rose in the camp over a disputed hunt, she could feel the emotions in the air and instinctively knew how to diffuse them. Empathic abilities, Vera explained. The matriarch could feel the emotional state of any wolf in her territory. It made her a brilliant leader because she always knew when her people were hurting, angry, or afraid. But perhaps most unsettling was what Soren called her command voice. When she spoke with authority, really spoke, channeling her will through her words, wolves obeyed. They couldn't help themselves. It's not mind control, Soren assured her when she'd accidentally made Bran drop the firewood he was carrying. It's more like they want to obey. Your voice carries the weight of the moon goddess herself. It's a gift for leadership, not tyranny. But you have to be careful with it. Alara practiced restraint as much as she practiced power. She learned which herbs could heal and which could kill. She learned pack law and history, ancient grudges and older alliances. She learned how to read scent, markers, and track prey, and fight both in human and wolf form. Thorn was a brutal teacher, pulling no punches during combat training. "The world won't coddle you because you're the matriarch," he said after knocking her on her ass for the 10th time that morning. "If anything, it will come at you harder. Again." But for all the hard training, there were moments of unexpected gentleness. Lyra taught her the old songs, ballads about the first matriarch and the wolves who followed her. Finn shared stories by the fire, tales of the ancient days when wolves and humans lived in harmony. Kira played chess with her in the evenings, teaching her strategy and patience, and Kyle was always there, not hovering, not smothering, but present. A steady presence at her back, offering advice when asked, respecting her space when needed. He pushed her during training, but never beyond what she could handle. He listened when she needed to talk and gave her silence when words failed. Alara found herself noticing things about him, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the scar on his jaw that she wanted to trace with her fingers, the way his scent grew stronger when he stood close to her, pine and oak and winter storm mixing with her lavender and morning dew. She wasn't naive. She knew what was happening. But after Garrett's rejection, the idea of caring for someone, of trusting someone with her heart, terrified her. "You're allowed to be afraid," Vera said one evening. They were sitting by the lake watching the stars emerge. "The moon goddess doesn't punish us for our fear. She only asks that we not let it control us." "He's an alpha king," Alara said quietly. "I'm—" "The matriarch," Vera interrupted firmly. "Stop defining yourself by what Garrett made you believe. You are not an Omega, Alara. You never were. And Kale doesn't see you as one. He sees you, all of you, the strength and the fear and the kindness. That's what draws him." "The mate bond—" "There is no mate bond between you," Vera said. "The moon goddess doesn't grant the same soul twice. Garrett was your fated mate, and he rejected that bond. It can never be recreated." The words should have hurt, but instead, Alara felt relief. "Then what is this? What I feel for Kale?" Vera smiled. "Choice, the most powerful bond of all. Fated mates are gifted by the goddess, but chosen mates are forged by free will and conscious decision. There is no destiny forcing you together, no magical compulsion. If you come to love Kyle, it will be because you chose him, and he chose you. That's rarer than any fated bond." Alara thought about that as the weeks passed. Kyle never pushed, never demanded, but his presence became as necessary to her as breathing, and she caught him watching her sometimes, his silver eyes soft with an emotion that made her heart race. One night, after a particularly brutal training session with Thorn, Alara sat by the fire, nursing bruised ribs and wounded pride. Kyle settled beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, and silently offered her a mug of tea laced with pain-relieving herbs. "I'm never going to be good enough," she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "All this training, all this power. I'm still the Omega who got rejected and cast out. How am I supposed to lead anyone?" Kyle was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Do you know why I took the Unchained into the wilderness 2,000 years ago?" Alara blinked at the sudden change of topic. "Because of the prophecy?" "Because I couldn't stomach what the packs were becoming," Kyle said quietly. "I was young then, barely a century old, but already I'd seen too much cruelty justified by hierarchy. Omegas beaten for daring to look alphas in the eye. Beta families torn apart because their bloodlines weren't pure enough. And I realized that waiting for the matriarch to return was an excuse. We'd all been using it as an excuse not to change, not to be better." He turned to look at her, his silver eyes reflecting the firelight. "So I gathered wolves who felt the same way, warriors who were tired of might making right, and we swore an oath to be better, to do better, while we waited for the matriarch to show us the way." "And now I'm here," Alara whispered, "and I don't know the way." "Neither did she," Kyle said. "The first matriarch. She was just a wolf who refused to accept that cruelty was inevitable, who believed that power should protect, not oppress, who chose mercy when vengeance would have been easier. That's why wolves followed her, not because she was the strongest, though she was, not because she was the smartest, though she was that too, but because she made them believe they could be better than their basest instincts." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His skin was warm, calloused from centuries of training and battle. You saved Ash when you had nothing left to give. You chose kindness when the world had shown you only cruelty. That's what makes you the matriarch, Alara. Not your power, not your lineage, but your heart. Alara's eyes stung with tears. She turned her hand in his, threading their fingers together. I'm afraid, she admitted, of failing, of letting you down, all of you. We all are, Kyle said simply. Fear doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise enough to understand the stakes. But Alara, you could never let us down, because you've already given us something we'd lost. He smiled. Hope? She kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't thought through. She just leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, and Cale went very still for a heartbeat before kissing her back with a gentleness that made her ache. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. I've waited 2,000 years, he murmured. I can wait as long as you need. I don't want to wait, Alara said, and she meant it. The fear was still there, would probably always be there, but underneath it was something stronger, the certainty that this was right, that Kyle was right, not because the moon goddess decreed it, but because she chose it. They stayed by the fire long into the night, hands intertwined, speaking in quiet tones about everything and nothing. And when Alara finally returned to her cabin, her heart was lighter than it had been since before the rejection. She was not an Omega. She was not powerless. She was the matriarch, and she was ready to show the world what that meant. 3 months after Garrett's rejection, a young wolf stumbled into the Unchained's camp at dawn, panting and terrified. His scent carried the markers of Silverpine territory, forest and embers and ash. Please, he gasped, collapsing at Kyle's feet. I need to see the matriarch. It's urgent. Alara emerged from her cabin, alert and ready. In the months of training she'd filled out, her body lean with muscle, her movements confident. She wore simple leather armor that Thorn had crafted for her, and her hair was braided back in the warrior style Vera had taught her. I'm here, she said. What's wrong? The young wolf looked up at her, and his eyes widened. You're real, he breathed. The rumors. We thought they were just stories, but you're real. Focus, Alara said gently but firmly. What's happened? Silverpine Pack sent scouts to find you, the wolf said rapidly. Alpha Garrett, he knows you're alive. He's gathering a war party. 20 wolves, maybe more. He's calling it a territory dispute, but everyone knows it's about you. He's coming to kill you before you can challenge his authority. A wave of power washed over the clearing, emanating from Alara. The young wolf flinched, but it wasn't hostile, more like standing too close to a bonfire, overwhelming but not harmful. When? Kyle asked, his voice sharp. Now! They left at first light. They'll be here by midday. The, Unchained moved into action with practiced efficiency. Thorn distributed weapons. Vera and Kira scouted approach routes. Marcus organized the non-combatants to safety. Within minutes, they were ready for war. But Alara stood in the center of the clearing, very still, feeling her wolf rise within her. They come to kill us, her wolf said, to silence the truth we represent. What do? We show them exactly what they've forgotten, her wolf replied. We show them what real power looks like. By the time the sun reached its zenith, Alara could smell them coming, forest and embers and ozone mixed with the acrid scent of aggression and fear. Garrett had brought more than 20 wolves, closer to 30, all in fighting form, a wall of fangs and muscle and ill intent. They emerged from the tree line in formation, Garrett at their center, and beside him, resplendent in fur-lined armor, was a female wolf Alara recognized from the pack, Samara, a fierce warrior and Garrett's new chosen. Mate, her scent of cinnamon and iron and blood carried clearly across the snow. Alara Moonwhisper, Garrett called out, his voice echoing across the clearing. You stand in neutral territory, but your presence threatens the peace. Surrender yourself to pack justice, and I will make your death quick. Alara stepped forward, alone. Behind her, the Unchained held position, but she could feel their readiness, their absolute faith that she could handle this. Hello, Garrett, she said calmly. It's been a while. He stared at her and something flickered in his eyes, shock perhaps at how changed she was. The emaciated, terrified Omega he'd cast out was gone. In her place stood a warrior, radiating confidence and power. "You should have died in the snow," Garrett said flatly. "You should have accepted your fate." "I did die in the snow," Alara replied. "The Omega you rejected, she's gone. What stands before you now is something else entirely." "Impossible. You were Omega born. Weak, destined to serve. You cannot change your nature." Alara smiled. It wasn't kind. "Want to bet?" Samara snarled, stepping forward. "Enough talk. Let me kill this pretender Alpha. I'll bring you her head as a mating gift." "By all means," Alara said, gesturing her forward. "Attack!" Samara launched herself forward with all the speed and fury of a seasoned warrior. She was large for a female alpha wolf, her russet fur sleek over powerful muscles, her teeth bared in a vicious snarl. Alara shifted. The transformation took less than a second. One moment she was human, the next she stood in her full matriarch form, white and silver and gleaming, nearly twice Samara's size, her eyes glowing with inner light. Samara tried to stop, skidding in the snow, but momentum carried her forward. Alara caught her mid-leap with one massive paw and slammed her into the ground with crushing force. The impact drove the air from Samara's lungs in a whoosh. Before she could recover, Alara's jaws closed around her throat, not biting, not killing, just holding. It was over in 3 seconds. Alara released Samara, who lay whimpering in the snow, thoroughly defeated and utterly humiliated. The matriarch shifted back to human form, standing over the fallen alpha female, in nothing but her skin and her power. "Anyone else want to try?" she asked conversationally. The Silverpine wolves stared in horror. Several backed away. Garrett himself had gone pale, his wolf howling in terror at the back of his eyes. "That's what I thought," Alara said. She raised her voice, letting it carry across the clearing. "But you didn't come alone, did you, Garrett? You brought witnesses. Good. Let them see what's about to happen." She turned and nodded at the Unchained. As one, they shifted. The Silverpine wolves' terror turned to absolute panic as 10 massive dire wolves materialized from seemingly nowhere. Each one dwarfed even Alara's impressive form, their fur colors ranging from midnight, black to storm, gray to silver. These weren't normal wolves. These were the stuff of myth, of legend, of the stories elders told to frighten pups into obedience. Kyle stood at the front, his dire wolf form magnificent and terrible, silver and black, with those same ancient eyes, easily 3 times the size of Garrett in wolf form. The Silverpine war party broke. Wolves scattered in every direction, their discipline shattering in the face of creatures they'd thought were extinct. Within seconds, only Garrett and Samara remained, both frozen in place, unable to run even if their pride would allow it. "Kneel," Alara said. She didn't shout, didn't need to. Her voice carried the weight of command, the authority of 2,000 years of power. Garrett's legs buckled. He fell to his knees, his wolf forcing submission even as his human mind railed against it. Beside him, Samara whimpered and pressed herself flat to the snow. Alara walked forward, her steps measured and deliberate. She stopped directly in front of Garrett, looking down at the alpha who had once thrown her away like garbage. "Mercy," Garrett gasped. "Please, I didn't know. I couldn't have known." "You knew I was your fated mate," Alara said coldly. "You knew the moon goddess chose us to be together, and you rejected that bond because I was weak, because I was Omega, because my power couldn't be felt through your arrogance." "I was wrong," Garrett said, and tears streamed down his face. "I was wrong, Alara. Please, I'll do anything." "You humiliated me," Alara continued, "cast me out to die, watched your pack laugh as guards dragged me away, and when I cried for help, you turned your back." I know, please." "But unlike you," Alara said quietly, "I will not choose vengeance when mercy is possible." She crouched down, bringing herself to eye level with him. "Here is your punishment, Garrett Blackthorn. You will return to your pack. You will step down as Alpha, ceding power to someone worthy. And you will spend the rest of your life teaching others not to make your mistake. You will tell them what happens when power corrupts, when hierarchy becomes tyranny, when wolves forget that strength is measured not in dominance, but in character." "Yes," Garrett breathed. "Yes, I swear it." "And you," Alara turned to Samara, who flinched. "You wanted to be alpha female, to rule through fear and force, but true power protects rather than oppresses. You're stripped of your rank. You'll serve the Omega you once mocked, learning humility, learning what it means to be truly strong. Samara nodded frantically, unable to speak. Alara stood, addressing the forest where she knew the scattered Silverpine wolves were hiding, listening. Hear me, wolves of Silverpine. Hear me, wolves of all territories. I am Alara Moonwhisper, the matriarch reborn. This is my territory now. These lands fall under my protection. Her voice rang out, clear and powerful, carrying on a wind that rose from nowhere. I establish new law. Omegas will no longer be slaves. Betas will no longer be overlooked. Alphas will lead by earning respect, not commanding fear. The mate bond will be honored, accepted or rejected with dignity, never used as a tool of humiliation. Rogues who seek redemption will find sanctuary. Those who harm the innocent will face justice. She felt her power surge, felt it reaching out across the territory like roots seeking water. Every wolf within 10 miles would feel it, the return of something ancient, something that had been missing for too long. The old ways are dead, Alara declared. We start anew. Spread the word. The matriarch has returned, and the world will change. She shifted one final time, her massive matriarch form towering over the clearing, and then she howled, a sound that echoed across the territories, a sound that spoke of justice and mercy and the promise of a better future. The Unchained answered her call. And far away, in packs, throughout the region, wolves stopped what they were doing and listened, their hearts stirring with something that felt dangerously like hope. 6 months after the confrontation at the clearing, the territories had transformed. Word of the matriarch spread like wildfire. Wolves came to her from every direction, Omegas fleeing abuse, rogues seeking redemption, even alphas humbled by their own failures and looking for guidance. Alara's territory, which she'd named Moonhaven, had grown from a hidden camp to a thriving settlement, not a traditional pack, but something new, a community where rank was earned through service rather than birth, where every wolf had voice and value. She'd learned to balance justice with mercy, strength with compassion. The parents who had bound her power came to her one night, broken and pleading for forgiveness. She didn't give it immediately. Trust had to be rebuilt, not simply granted. But she offered them a path, work, service, proof that they had changed. I'm not the Omega you betrayed, she told them, and I'm not interested in revenge. But if you want to be part of my life again, you have to earn it, one day at a time. They were still working on that. Some wounds took longer to heal. Garrett had kept his word. He'd stepped down, ceding Silverpine's leadership to a younger beta wolf with compassion and wisdom. He taught now, traveling between packs, speaking to young wolves about honor and the danger of unchecked power. They would never be friends, Alara and Garrett. The mate bond he'd severed left scars that wouldn't fade, but she respected his effort to atone. And Kyle. Alara stood at the edge of the frozen lake, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold. She felt Kyle approach before she heard him, his storm and oak scent wrapping around her like a familiar blanket. Penny for your thoughts, matriarch, he said, coming to stand beside her. Just thinking about how much has changed, Alara said. She leaned into him, and his arm came around her shoulders naturally. 6 months ago, I was dying in the snow. Now I'm a queen, Kyle finished, leader of Moonhaven, champion of the forgotten, the wolf who reminded us all what we could be. Alara turned in his arms, looking up at his scarred, beloved face. I couldn't have done any of it without you, without the Unchained. You gave me more than hope, Kyle. You gave me family. You gave us purpose, Kyle replied. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. For 2,000 years, we waited, and you were worth every moment. I love you, Alara said. The words came easily now, without fear. Not because of destiny or prophecy, but because you saw me when no one else did. Because you believed in me before I could believe in myself. Because you chose me, and I choose you. Kyle's eyes glowed silver in the fading light. I love you too, my matriarch, my chosen mate, my partner in all things, he kissed her. He, deep and slow and full of promise. And when they finally broke apart, both smiling like idiots, Alara felt a contentment so complete It almost hurt. But in the distance, beyond the territory's borders, storm clouds gathered. Alara caught the scent of something wrong on the wind, sulfur and decay and ancient malice. "Something's coming," she said quietly. "I know," Kale replied. Elder Finn felt it too. The blood moon rises in 3 months, and with it, the Shadow King, Alara finished, the name from the histories. The enemy the first matriarch had died fighting. "He's waking." "Are you ready?" Kyle asked. Alara looked around at her territory, at the wolves who had chosen to follow her, at the family she had built from nothing, at the future she was fighting to create. Then she looked back at Kyle, at the love and trust in his eyes. "No," she admitted, "but I will be. Because I'm not alone, and because someone has to stand between the darkness and everything worth protecting." She was no longer the Omega who had been rejected and cast out. She was no longer the terrified girl dying in the snow. She was Alara Moonwhisper, the matriarch reborn. And whatever came next, she would face it the way she had faced everything else, with her chosen family at her back, her power burning bright, and her heart open to both justice and mercy. The old world was dead, and she was just getting started. And so Alara's journey from outcast to queen became legend, a story of suffering transformed into strength, of rejection reborn as purpose. She learned that true power isn't the absence of fear, but the courage to move forward despite it. That family isn't always blood, but sometimes the pack you choose. And that the greatest victories come not from vengeance, but from choosing mercy when hatred would be easier. Her tale reminds us all. The world measures our worth not by what we're born with, but what we do with what we have. Even the smallest wolf can change everything if she refuses to stop believing. What did you think of Alara's transformation? Have you ever felt underestimated or dismissed, only to discover your own hidden strength? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please like, share, and hit that subscribe button with notifications on, so you never miss the next chapter of our journey through myth and magic. Because when the blood moon rises and the Shadow King awakens, Alara and her Unchained will face their greatest challenge yet. War is coming to Moonhaven, and the matriarch will have to decide just how far she's willing to go to protect everything she loves. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next chapter.